and the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies thanks Bússola Tech for inviting me to moderate this debate on integration of legislative systems. Information technology changes every day, and this can be expected to continue in the near future. Computers, internet, mobile devices, social media, and artificial intelligence are just some of the things that have been impacting societies for the last 5 decades. People and organizations are facing huge challenges as the virtual world has become a reality. Parliaments are also impacted, and demands for increased participation in interaction come from politicians and citizens alike. To make all this possible in a short period of time with quality, it is important to establish a good foundation for the softwares that are being developed. The goal is to continuously bring more and more value to parliamentarians and society. And this brings us to this panel, software architecture that allows integration with legacy systems and is ready to integrate with new systems that have to face different requirements such as user experience, resilience, and security. To discuss this issue, this panel is composed by Mr. Fotios Fitsilis, who has founded the Hellenic OCR team, a crowdsourcing initiative for the processing and analysis of parliamentary data. He is also head of the Department for Scientific Documentation and Supervision in the Scientific Service at the Hellenic Parliament. Mr. Joseph Conteh, Head of Information Technology at the Parliament of Sierra Leone, and Mr. Jonathan Ruckert, founder of NovaWorks Australia, specializing in parliamentary solutions and consultancy. He is also a cybersecurity consultant, cloud strategist, and architect. This panel will last 60 minutes, and the audience may post questions on the chat. And without further ado, I would like to start and asking Mr. Fotios, in a nutshell, Mr. Fotios, how would you define software architecture and why is it important for parliaments?
Thank you very much, Rodolfo, Jonathan, Joseph. Great to be in this very interesting panel. And of course, I would like to thank the attendees for watching us this late. I think it's the last session of the day. Thank you for joining in. I would like to, this is actually the core question. Why does this all matter? And if it does matter, how can we possibly improve if it's necessary to improve systemic architecture in parliaments? I would like to start by saying that a lot has changed in the past maybe 5 years, some say maybe 10 years. And I'm referring, of course, to ICT systems. And when we talk about computer systems or digital systems in parliaments, in previous decades, this might not have a big difference compared to any other organization. But you could plan a system, let's say, in a ministry or in a private corporation or a small and medium enterprise, and in a parliament it wouldn't make much difference because they were essentially organizations. So what has changed in the past few years? I would say that the core element, and this is something to be discussed also within this panel, I would say, the core element that has changed, or the core perception maybe that is now different, is that currently there are available standards that describe legislative systems and laws. There are standards, so acceptable formats and structures and data structures that can be used by parliaments and in general representative institutions, so that these institutions can now structure, format their legislative documents so that they can become machine readable. So this, of course, could be possible in earlier time, but each parliament need to follow a bottom-up or an approach from scratch. They had essentially to develop from zero their data structures, model their laws, so that they can be accessible and processable by computer systems. Now this is not necessary anymore in this detail because these standards are available. Such a standard, for instance, is a Comantoso that has gained huge, I would say, huge favorability among parliamentary institutions, primarily in Europe, and I'm reading a lot of reports in latest months and years that this is also the maybe the standard of choice for other parliaments. This is, of course, something that each institution alone needs to, this choice needs to be made by institution alone. The use of standards has several advantages. First of all, if you structure your legislation according to these standards, not only the legislation and other documents, legal documents, such as legal reports or meeting minutes, session minutes, they can be also modeled in a Comantoso or similar standards. I'm not saying that there's only one standard there, but this is the most maybe widely available standard today. When you have such a standard, as said, and you model your documents accordingly, you made them also available to the wider parliamentary community. You made them also comparable to other legal systems so that it is possible to construct services that do comparative or legal research, for instance, among other things. And there's practically no limit to your fantasy or to what one person, one software engineer might achieve using these data structures. You can combine them, you can offer all kinds of services, you can even create an ecosystem of such documents, or maybe also paid services with paid access to for special applications to communities that are interested in such applications. So this is the one thing. And allow me now to come to a second thing that I think it has changed or is going to maybe disrupt the way we see parliaments in the future. And I'm talking, of course, about nothing else but the maybe rapid introduction of artificial intelligence-based tools and services in the parliamentary workspace. Now, you know, Rodolfo, that the Brazilian Congress is maybe one of the most advanced in terms of using such tools and services in the world, not only in Latin America, but in the world. And maybe we should hear what you have to say about that. Now, the world is looking carefully, the parliaments are looking carefully, because there is a certain potential. I'm not saying it will be like this, but there is a high potential that when you use applications and services that are based on artificial intelligence technologies, because artificial intelligence is actually not a single technology. It's a bunch of technologies. It's a generic term. So, but when you use, let's say, machine processable applications that can crunch data, big parliamentary data, and they have the ability to deliver almost real-time results to any human prompt, then indeed this has potential not only to disrupt internally the processes. So I'm a parliamentary researcher, for instance. I can ask, with the help of a computer or of an AI application, I could do my job, I could be 10 times more productive a day. Imagine that. This is a huge boost internally. But in addition, it is also a huge boost in the connection and the possibility to connect parliaments to citizens, because citizens right now, in several occasions, are rather difficult to access parliamentary information. Such chat systems, chat bots, could make this connection to the parliamentary services much more easy. The citizens could ask information from Parliament. Citizens could be involved in a certain way to lawmaking processes, could be involved into parliamentary control processes. So these types of applications, AI, artificial intelligence-based applications, have a huge potential. And I would like to end by saying the following. We're talking here about computer systems. Nice. Are current legacy systems in any given parliament able to embed these new types of applications? We have done in the Greek parliament, and in other parliaments that we work with in Europe, we have done such, may I say, experiments. No, it's not easy, because these, if I may use the term, these old systems, they function according a predetermined way. It is difficult to embed new applications in them. Maybe on some occasions they need to be redesigned or scrapped and be developed from scratch. This has to be assessed, and therefore it's very specific and specialized consultancy necessary. This has to be assessed for each individual parliament differently. There's no one size fits all here. Every architecture, computer architecture or systemic architecture, needs to be assessed in order for the parliament to know if it can support the future evolution, systemic evolution. Sometimes it's not even possible. Sometimes it is easier and maybe cheaper to build something from scratch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fotios, for your comments, and also thank you for mentioning Brazil. Thank you a lot. Mr. Joseph, as the head of IT at the Parliament, what comments could you bring in regarding this issue of system software architecture?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rodolfo, and thank you, colleague panelists. Are you getting me loud and clear?
Yes, I can hear you quite well.
Okay, so software architecture and system development are the core foundation for information technology. The way hardware equipment respond can be determined by the development of the software. And Parliament is an institution that is more or less dynamic. And before COVID, there were a few or little softwares that are used for parliamentary proceedings or parliamentary core functions. So most of what we were using before COVID were software that were not built specifically for Parliament, but we are incorporating to ensure that it works and fits the parliamentary platform. But during COVID, one of the things that we learned as parliamentary administrators, especially software developers or ICT managers, is that Parliament needs to have a system, a software system that can take care of parliamentary operations electronically. If we have a similar pandemic, and parliaments can continue to function, can continue to operate, and it cannot be put to halt. Case in point, in the Parliament of Sierra Leone, and before, like Mr. Fotios was making his presentation, that sometimes it is good to build system from scratch rather than upgrading or working up with those systems that are legacy systems, trying to incorporate and develop. So for us, before COVID, we do not have a software system that is taking care of the core functions of parliamentary operations. So during COVID, we were able to come up with a system that is almost translating our parliamentary operations into an electronic operations. Say, for instance, like I said, the core functions of our parliament is one, representation, lawmaking, oversight, and also the scrutiny and allocation of budgets. So these four core functions, members of parliament need to ensure that they have the access to parliamentary information, and also not only the access, but also to be able to attend and also to be able to participate. So our first look was, how can we develop, or how can we build a system that can give members of parliament the leverage, the opportunity, and the chance to be able to do all of those core functions. And what we were able to start with has to do with what we refer to as enterprise content management system. And with the enterprise content management system, there is a software architecture commonly called Alfresco. It is an ECM platform. It gives us the leverage to be able to firstly give members of parliament access to parliamentary documents, from votes and proceedings, official reports, committee reports, other papers. They were able to get it electronically within or out of parliament. So that was our first focus, and we were able to achieve that. And whilst members of parliament were at their constituency and they are unable to come to parliament physically, we were able to push those parliamentary documents through the software, through their tablets. They were able to get access to bills, agreements, and those documents that they have access to, they were able to go through them. And through that same software, we give them access also so that they can participate electronically. So I think software in architecture, it plays a vital role, not just for the enhancement of parliamentary operations, but also to ensure that the core functions of parliament are able to be synchronized, work in synergy, and also to produce a better parliament and better laws for the development of a nation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your answer. And Mr. Jonathan, I would like to bring you in. Considering your experience with projects that are used by different parliaments, not only one, but many parliaments, what could you add? Are there additional important reasons for planning a software architecture?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And thanks everyone for having me on this panel as well. It's really interesting to understand and to listen to everyone's different experiences. So yeah, like we've dealt with lots and lots of different parliaments over the last 17 plus years, and some of the common pitfalls that we see when we're looking at sort of architecture and you know, adoption of new technology and whatnot is sometimes you know, there really isn't a lot of planning on the parliament side. And you know, when you look at, say, for example, like one of the sort of big passionate topics I'm very sort of, sorry, topics that I'm passionate about is governance. So, you know, we find that sometimes, you know, the implementation of software is done for the sake of it looks good, or, you know, it's not necessarily understanding what your wider picture is or what your actual strategy is to actually utilize that software for. So when I look at architecture, I'm saying, like, how does the actual software actually enhance the parliament experience? You know, does it actually fit into your strategy? Is it actually going to increase your technical debt over a period of time as well? So, and I think these are the things which, you know, that people are not actually looking at necessarily in a larger point of view, and that can cause longer term issues for a parliament, you know, in the future. So for me, it's sort of like they might go, well, actually, we need a new public website. So they might look at their public website, not considering their legacy systems, because when they go live with a public website, it actually becomes a legacy system itself. So you need to understand how you're going to support it, how you're going to maintain it, how are you going to then upgrade it as well. And sometimes we see parliaments as well spending about twice as much money trying to get data out of a existing system and put it into a new system just to cause the same cycle over and over again in 3 years' time or 5 years' time as well. So for me, architecture really becomes important in the planning process, the assessment process, the security process. Like, it's the actual whole process around onboarding, you know, and understanding and doing that assessment. Has it got compatibility with open data standards? Because, you know, as sort of Fotios was saying, you know, if you are sort of consistently applying an open data standard, you actually have a lot more control around your data, and also the ability to extract it, to import it, to actually manage that information. Data flow becomes actually a lot more cost effective in the long term as well. So all of these sort of decisions have to be made up front when you look at the architectural side of things. Are you introducing a new cloud service? You know, are you introducing a new security risk? Like, all of these sort of decisions are actually have to be made before you actually do the implementation.
Thank you, Jonathan. Very important points that you have mentioned there. Mr. Fotios, to close this question, would you like to add anything?
Well, this is the question that essentially you can build around a whole conference. So it's a lot to be said. But I would like to stick to also what Jonathan has said. You need some sort of standard. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Well, okay, of course it matters what standard it is. For instance, the US, they haven't opted. I mean, they were first there at the end. Towards the end of the 90s, with XML-based data structures for representing their legislation. So technically, they were the standard. They set the standard in the world. And then much later, 20 years later, came the UN, the United Nations, and started developing or giving the order to develop a standard, which became then the standard for the rest of the world. So essentially, it doesn't matter. You need some kind of open data structure so that not only you communicate across your, let's say, national legal order and national borders, but also communicate across borders, maybe regional. In Latin America, you could have your regional data hub there. Or in Europe, we have, of course, our natural, let's say, house, which is the European Union, and there are 27 member states there. Some sort of communication across legal orders should be there. So if you don't take this into account, yeah, you're lost.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next simple question, because I guess that all questions regarding software architecture are somehow complex. What are the main points to consider when planning a software architecture? I would like to get the answer from Mr. Joseph, please.
Yes. So for software architecture, some of the main points should start with, firstly, data gathering. In the software development lifecycle, the process that we use to gather users' requirements help us in developing a system that will be user-friendly, and also it will be able to actually do what the user are expecting for it to do. So I think the first point which should come to mind has to do with data gathering. Data gathering is so much important in software development because it gives you a reflection of what the users are expecting from the software. And because it gives that reflection, it will actually drive the usage of that particular software. And the importance of data gathering is not limited to just how the software will operate, but it also help to structure the system, its operations, its usage, and the components that are embedded in the system. We've put together, for some time ago, we wanted to get an internet portal. And the idea behind the internet portal is to ensure that members of parliament have access to an electronic pigeonhole, wherein documents will be sent electronically, and also feedback from members who get those feedback electronically. Instead of them going to their physical pigeonhole, they will access those physical pigeonhole now electronically. And so where we started, the starting point was how to get information about the look and feel of the software architecture. So I think to a large extent, data gathering is a way to start, and it's a good area to note with regards to developing a system.
Thank you a lot. Mr. Jonathan, considering what our colleague Joseph has just said, and considering the experience that you have having many parliaments as customers or clients, what could you add as the main points that we should consider when planning a software architecture for a software that is going to be used by a parliament?
Yeah, so I think there's probably, I've been thinking about sort of, what has sort of been said by Joseph and everyone else as well during this debate. And I think there are really two things which we need to sort of look at. And I think you can sort of separate it into two different streams. One is like, is the Parliament actually invested in building it themselves? Have they done a market research? Is there anything else out on the market that could actually do it? Or is there another Parliament that can provide help? And I know, Brazil again has been very sort of generous in terms of, sharing their knowledge and, software as well to other sort of parliaments in that region as well. And which I, do commend yourself for. And I think, do you have to build something yourself if something is already available is one of the big aspects, which I'd like to sort of discuss. And when you sort of look at it and whether something is actually fit for purpose or whether you're actually buying something just for the sake of buying something as well. And so to me, to make anything sort of successful from a software architecture point of view, stakeholder involvement and also analysis of their requirements is really, really important to make sure that the software itself and the architecture itself should enable your end user. It shouldn't hinder them. So whether that's through user interfaces or whatnot, because sometimes and what we also find is that the people doing the assessment on the architecture or the technology or the software itself are not necessarily the end users. So if the end users aren't actually consulted, are you actually going to get a good adoption rate in your technology as well? Because, you could buy something or spend a lot of money developing something, but at the end of the day, if the member of parliament doesn't use it, if the citizens don't use it, or if the office staff don't actually use it, then it's actually not a successful project. So, to consider all of those sort of aspects, it's really important to, bring it back down to, well, are the end users actually going to be happy with the product? Is it going to enhance their, job satisfaction? Is that actually going to enhance what they're actually doing for their job as well? As sort of Fotios was saying as well, with artificial intelligence, it should be an enabler, for their job. It shouldn't be a hindrance, or it shouldn't actually replace their job either. It's understanding what those sort of, the complexity usually isn't not necessarily with the software itself, it's with all the other decisions around it. So around, have we got the right standing orders, sessional orders, in place to actually enable, us to use the technology as well. So I think there's a very broad range of things, which need to be assessed when you actually look at that sort of software side of things. And, you know, parliaments are not software development houses, you know, traditionally, unless you're in a larger, you know, you can have your own team, or you have enough funding to actually do that yourself. So, and sometimes when you bring in an external, you know, company who's never worked with the parliamentary processes before, you know, they might think about things in isolation, not necessarily, well, how does legislation fit into bills or table papers, and how does that link into members, and why are amendments important, you know, and understanding that then you might have to actually train them up in all that subject knowledge as well. So building your own solution can be quite tough just by its own right, if you don't necessarily have the subject matter expertise or the knowledge, or, you know, within that sort of, within your own parliament as well. So that's where it gets really interesting really quickly, I think.
Thank you a lot, Jonathan. And you mentioned one thing that I find that is really important. The first thing that you said regarding checking if there is anything ready-made that you can use, because nowadays we are always asked to do more with less money, less time, and so it's almost impossible. And having something that's already there so we can use is very important. And I would like to link this to what Mr. Fotios said, because I think that if we start working with standards, using softwares from different vendors will help us achieve that goal. Mr. Fotios, would you like to join us in this debate?
It's pretty much all said by Jonathan and Joseph and yourself. I would like to share my personal experience here, as we all do. So I work in a parliament. I'm a researcher and a senior researcher, and happen to be also a head of a department for documentation. So I had this problem. So introducing software solutions in our house, but not having enough in-house expertise to do so. So what do? We did conform with this problem for a lot of years. So we felt within a very small circle of people within the parliament, we somehow need to unify, to integrate this, let's say, black box, which parliaments are for the rest of the world, and to link this black box to the technical expertise that is out there. So how do you do this connection? And what we did is, which by the way, the Hellenic OCR team, which is by the way an IPU, Interparliamentary Union Good Practice, or innovative practice whatsoever, we did the following. We built a network. A network is, of course, not an institutional tool. It is rather an informal tool. So we built a platform. We're based on Slack. We built an international platform across several continents and countries to integrate, to link different professionals. Most of them currently are IT professionals, software developers, or engineers in general, to link them with parliamentary professionals in order to jointly develop. And this is where Jonathan is very right. Of course, he's right. He's earning money doing that. Otherwise, you would be out of business, Jonathan. You need to combine two different worlds: the parliamentary world with the technical world. And the only way to do this is, as an outsider, you need to read a lot to understand what these people have in their minds, the parliamentary nerds or the people within the parliament. It's not the complexity. I like that, and I would like to repeat it. Lies not in the software, as Rodolfo said. There are standards there, tons of open source software, tons. You can't handle this. It's more than you need. You need smart integration solutions. And what we did in I would like to share my own experience, our own experience. We thought very hard on this, and we said, okay, there's a practice, or let's say an approach that was developed in early after the early 2000s, the enterprise integration pattern approach. So you have different systems that do not talk to each other. So how can you integrate different systems? I'm not talking also only about old systems and make them speak together, but also a new system that you bring into your legacy, let's say, into your old so-called e-parliament. So how can you make that talk? So there is a solution even for that. Practically, you build a translator, and you translate the messages that the one system says into maybe a language of reference, so that all these systems speak the same language eventually. And then, of course, this can be helped if you adopt an open standard like a Commandos or any XML-based scheme would do practically. So it doesn't matter that you use a specific system or standard. What it matters is that it follows certain principles, and data first is a good principle. Openness is a good principle, as transparency is as well. So if you use a certain amount of these principles, and if you can achieve, in addition, a good level of understanding between your external software engineers and your internal support system that will eventually own the system later, then you have made more than enough in order for this system to be actually usable for the next generation of let's say, of parliamentary systems.
Thank you very much, Fotios. Mr. Joseph, to close this question, would you like to bring in any additional comment?
Yes, I agree with Mr. Fotios that he rightly mentioned looking at firstly the network which they created to ensure that they have a better system. I think I have learned something from that. It's a good way forward. And also making mention about integration and also synchronization of system. It's good for us to have a system, but the flexibility for it to be integrated and also to be able to synchronize all the other platforms or all the other systems into one system. That's a very good point. What I think also very relevant has to do with the development processes start within. It is good for Parliament, instead of outsourcing or getting everything from software developers, professionals in the software world, engineers, but for us to be part of the process. Those of us who are working in Parliament, there is a need and an important need for us to be part of whatever system that we want to develop. If we are part of the system development process, the analysis process, and the data gathering process, we'll be able to reflect exactly what we are looking for. End users' contribution in system development is much more relevant as compared to the system developer or the code designer. If somebody develops a code, he sits wherever he or she is and develops that code, and he thinks this code can run XYZ and produces certain results. If the end user does not contribute for the changes of that particular code, at the end of the day, when it comes back to the end user, what will happen? There will be an amendment. So I think whatever system Parliament wants to develop, it begins in the Parliament. Professionals in the Parliament and those who have been in Parliament for some time, that knows the legislative process, the representational process. Those workers need to contribute, come with idea of what we refer to in software engineering as workflow process. How does it work? How do you do your work? and whatever is taken from that particular parliamentary officer, it can be translated to a pseudocode. And at the end of the day, the developer or the designer who writes the code will be able to write something that reflects exactly what obtains in the parliament. I think that's all for now.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next question. Mr. Jonathan Fotios, he explained it a bit. He touched on a very important issue nowadays, and which is legacy systems. And we have to think that often many parliaments are old institutions which have old systems, and we need to give more value to the customers. So we cannot just stop what we are doing and just start to recoding all the systems, all the old systems that we have. In that way, in order to dig a bit deeper, how can a software architecture help meet the challenge of integrating legacy systems with new technologies that today demand better user experience, resilience, and security?
Yeah, fantastic question. It's really interesting in our experience when we talk to, you know, a lot of us sort of clerks or the sort of senior figures within Parliament, and they look at a new system or whatnot, and they go, you know, we should just cut over straight away. You know, I said, like what I call the Big Bang approach. And in reality, it's really difficult to ever achieve that in any parliament whatsoever, because you know the government and parliament still needs to operate. You know, and you're never going to have a perfect moment to introduce any new functionality. So it has to be carefully thought through and planned. And I know that I've worked with other parliaments where they have change freezes, you know, over, you know, any time that they're sitting within Parliament, you know, there's no new software deployments or whatnot. And then the other issue is then obviously everyone's very busy with their day jobs. So, you know, their involvement and the stakeholder involvement process as part of that is quite sort of interesting. So, you know, when you sort of look at the sort of legacy systems, usually there's been a lot of time, a lot of investment in those processes as well. And the thing with Parliament is that it's not just one process. It's, you know, the management of member information, management of tabling of papers, managing of bills, managing of legislation, managing of your public website, of your social media, it's managing, you know, committees, it's managing transcript, broadcasting. You know, I could keep on going on probably for the next sort of, you know, 20 minutes. But so that sort of explains the complexity when you look at any legacy system and introducing any new functionality as well. And you know, what we find though, you know, when it comes back down to sort of software architecture and whatnot, is that, you know, if you're looking at replacing, say, your bills module or your legislation module, you know, look at it at a modular level, but at a modular sense, think about that global picture and the bigger picture when you're trying to then look at what your new strategy is as well. And, you know, thinking also about what's going to happen again in the future with that module as well, I think is also the next step. So it's not necessarily thinking just one step in your future, it's also trying to predict and trying to understand, you know, what that sort of next step is well from there, because eventually that system will become a legacy system as well, you know. And, you know, if you are looking at purchasing or like getting an external system in place, you know, you've got, are they going to continually upgrade it? You know, so is that risk different to you as well? Like there's a whole range of sort of things which you can actually then do an assessment on, like, because if you're developing it, you're maintaining it, you're the one responsible for that life cycle as well. If you do outsource it to, you know, Microsoft or Google or Amazon or, you know, whoever out there as well, are they going to take on that ownership around that life cycle, you know, so you can then focus on the parliamentary side rather than the software side as well. So there are offsets, there are pros and cons for every single scenario, and every single sort of parliament is different. But, you know, what I would sort of recommend, you know, is my sort of closing statement around this sort of question is that think about it like a modular system. You know, try not to replace everything at once if you don't have to. Or you might be starting with what I call a greenfield environment where, you know, everything is still paper-based. So you don't actually have a solution, which is obviously a lot cleaner. But a lot of existing parliaments do have some sort of software in place to deal with certain scenarios. So think about it in a modular point of view, but also make sure that you are consistently applying that sort of standard approach to that bigger picture.
Thank you very much. Fotios, you brought this matter. I would like to hear from you, if you can just go a bit deeper on this.
All right. I would like to start by saying that digital transformation is not completely separated from processes. Actually, it goes hand in hand. So when you are when you want to go forward with your digital transformation, essentially you have also to repurpose or to work on your processes, on your internal organizational processes. Otherwise, you risk digitizing bureaucracy, and you don't want to do that. So I will come back to my earlier. This is something that I firmly believe. One should, when you're meaning serious with advancing your digital representation of your parliament, you need to sit back a little bit and think, what do I want to achieve by doing this? Do I really want to digitize useless procedures? Is this what I want? Or procedures that are maybe duplicating themselves or creating data that are not needed or not needed in this form? So an essential digital strategy, I would say, needs first to be there. And strategies need to be developed in-house. They cannot be imported. So you can't invite KPMG or any hotshot out there as a consultant and expect that it really understands Parliament and develops the future of your individual Parliament as the people need it. Actually, this is an internal process. And only if you know that, you are then ready to proceed with building your digital system. And then you should also, one step in this process involves also legacy systems. And I will repeat again myself, usually you don't have an integrated system. Most of the parliaments I know, and kindly Jonathan and Rodolfo and Joseph, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the parliaments that I know do not have an integrated system. They have scattered systems all over the place. There's not, rarely, and I know some examples because they were built from scratch. In rare occasions, you have an integrated system based on a unified architecture, on a certain vision. In most of the cases, you have systems that do not communicate with each other. You have cloud-based services. You have old desktop applications. You have whatever you want. Whatever it's there. So, and you need to think if you want to integrate all this, or which part of this. Not all might be necessary. For instance, and I will give an example from our own parliament, the Hellenic Parliament. We do have, we built in mid 2000s, we did a huge procurement for a lot of money. And we built a system, or we built a system that solved the then requirements, the 15 years or more than 15 years ago. Well, actually, the requirements were designed 20 years ago. So we built a system that covered the requirements back then. So 20 years later, one may imagine that these requirements are not up to date anymore. So what do you do now? Do you keep up the system or not? Actually, the direction we went, and I have in my mind, because we still haven't made this political decision, is it doesn't matter what you do with the system. What it matters is what you do with your data. So the data is what matters, not the iron, the servers that they can be scrapped easily after a few years, or the hard disks all might migrate in some cloud service. So what it matters is your data, and you need to have a consistent data policy that takes into account your old data, your legacy data, and try to bring them into a machine-readable, open, structured format. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Fotios, and I totally agree that for a good result, for success, rethinking the process under the laws of the virtual world is key. We are on the same page here. And as the head of IT at the Parliament, I believe that Mr. Joseph can bring in some insight regarding this issue. Please, Mr. Joseph.
Yes. So technology in Parliament, especially the electronic transformation, is fully implemented in Parliament during COVID. For other institutions, the banking sector, those commercial institutions, they were fully doing electronic or automated system. Almost all of what they are doing, their transactions were automated. But when it comes to Parliament, for us in Africa, especially in the sub-region, West Africa, we started moving into automation during the COVID pandemic and after the COVID lessons. So lessons that we've learned and issues that we've tried to address has to do with first, integrating from the legacy system that we have and also those new systems that we want to develop. So those integration, I agree with Mr. Fotios that he made mention that first thing that comes to mind, it is difficult for Parliament to have more than 2 or 3 systems that have the same structure. Most times, all of the systems have different structure. But what is important has to do with the linking or the synchronization. For instance, for us, we have our legislative system, and also we do not only have our legislative system. We have our parliamentary document system and our e-participation system. So what we've tried to do for the past 3 or 4 years is to see how we can link those 3 systems to be synchronized in one system. And one of the learnings that we got from this has to do with systems integration. System integration is much more important, regardless of the first challenge that will come to mind has to do with the development. If those 3 systems are developed from 3 different platforms and 3 different developers, the first challenge that comes to mind, how to integrate those systems. So sometimes the challenge that we have in Parliament has to do with the legacy system, integrating those legacy systems with the modern or the recent system. We have experienced during the COVID, we already have our EDMS that we've been using. And whilst we are using this EDMS, those virtual technology that has come up, we want members of Parliament not to only have access to virtual meetings, but in the virtual platform, they should also have access to parliamentary documents in the virtual platform instead of giving them access to two platforms. We wanted them to have access to one platform, one credential, and also once they have access to that one credential, one platform, they will have access to the two information, the parliamentary document as well as the e-participation platform. So integrating these two was not just an easy task, but we were able to pass through it. And some of the experiences that we encounter during that integration has to do with the development. And because these two are from two different platforms, and we are trying to ensure that they link to each other, it was not just a challenge, but we were able to overcome it. I think that's a road, and also it's not just a road, but it's a road to note. And whilst we are doing parliamentary development of systems, we take note of whatever systems we are putting in place to ensure that it have that provision for integration to another system. If there are provision, even though it's a legacy system, but if there are set provisions for it to be integrated or compatible to other systems, it can be easily done regardless of the years that have gone by.
Thank you a lot. And Jonathan, would you like to close the question with additional comments after what we've heard from Joseph and Fotios?
Yeah, I think everything has definitely been said, and it's been some very sort of insightful comments, to be honest. So I don't have a lot more to you know, add into that sort of particular topic, to be honest. But yeah, I said, like, it's been a very sort of valuable insight and debate today, I believe. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. We are almost running out of time, but I'd like to hear from you just one last question in a very short time. Considering the shortage of IT professionals that we are facing all over the world these days, how does that impact the working with a reliable software architecture? Please, Fotios.
Yeah, very briefly. Well, this is one of the reasons we built this platform, to connect individuals, professionals worldwide, professionals of different backgrounds and expertise. Since you can't find them in one country, you might be able to locate them elsewhere. So we built this network, and it works, surprisingly. Finding there are modern tools, digital platforms. You can access all these experts, and you can make them work for you through different types of contracts and incentives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Joseph Conteh, I don't know if you have the same kind of problem in Sierra Leone, but what could you bring in regarding this shortage of IT professionals?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Fotios. We too are having the same challenge. It's something that cuts across all over the world, and I am happy to be part of this session. I think I can learn from this network, and I'm also be keeping in touch to ensure that we're able to interact, and out of the interaction we can get ideas, and also we can be able to share the knowledge, and also to expand on the enhancements of parliamentary or digital technology in the legislature.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, as a representative of a private company living in Australia, and that may pose even harder challenge for you, because often people that are native speakers, English native speakers, it's easier for them to work remotely for other countries. And I believe that you have been facing this kind of issue as well. What is the impact and how to deal with that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, yeah, developing a network is really, really important. We've also got a working group as well, which we've sort of established just to assist other parliaments in that sort of common strategy. And I think, you know, there always will be, and I believe, you know, now it's sort of, especially over the last couple of years, that there will be an IT skill shortage going forward. And I think it's sort of, you know, both Joseph and Fotios has sort of explained is that it's really, how do you bridge that gap between the parliamentary knowledge and the IT? Like, you could go off and hire a software developer, you know, without, but it's really about that investment in the training of the knowledge in terms of how to apply that to this particular topical area around the parliament side of things, which I think is where that sort of bridge and where that sort of skill shortage is. It's the translation between how a parliament actually runs and the technical implementation, the technical side of it, is really, you know, going to be always a challenge for any single parliament. And I think, you know, forums like this, you know, establishing a network and, you know, being involved in working groups and, you know, understanding what other parliaments' challenges are, you know, you can extend your own knowledge base and you can extend your own IT skills, you know, shortage yourself by leveraging that knowledge from other parliaments. And I think, you know, the more and more we sort of, you know, interact with more and more parliaments, and the more we introduce parliaments into these forums and, you know, make those introductions into other parliaments, I think that's where we see the value. And I think that's where you can start to bridge that gap.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, unfortunately, we are reaching the end of this debate. And I would like to ask Mr. Fotios for his final comments. Please, Mr. Fotios.
A lot has been said today. I would like to urge people to use existing networks and access colleagues in other parliaments, because their problems might be solved somewhere else. So I don't think there's much to be done here other than really reach out to professionals, to parliamentary colleagues, and see if they can have some common understanding and approach on any given issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Joseph Conteh, your final comments, please.
Yeah, I think two things is important, which I have learned in this session. One, system integration, and also parliamentary networking, especially in developing or enhancing legislative technology. There is a need for us to continue to collaborate, to network, and leverage from others' experience, especially things that they have done and they have succeeded in. Through this networking, we can be able to enhance and broaden our skills and also improve parliamentary legislation. Integration as well, system integration on system architecture is a key, and since we've deliberated on it widely, I think it will help us in a different parliament. On that note, I thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jonathan, your final comments, please.
Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely leverage your, you know, networking. The problem, you know, has been probably solved in a parliamentary sense somewhere around the world. It's just understanding where to look. If you are embarking on digital transformation and software development or any other thing like that, is, you know, focus around your new work around open standards, open data, and potentially even open source as well. You know, if you can focus on open data and standards-based practices, I think, you know, you'll set yourself up for a better future when you look at any of your sort of digitalization processes.
Thank you very much. And just to wrap it up, a lot has been said during this debate, and the main items that I could take note were first, adopt standards, because it is very important. embrace artificial intelligence because it seems to be the future. We have to think about ways of improving, enhancing, or fostering participation. So the architecture should allow that. Taking into account that there are many vendors that may have the right solution already made for you, so you could get a vast amount of experience behind that software and in a small period of time. Also, the importance of taking into consideration and bringing into the process the stakeholders, which seems to be nowadays, I guess, there is no way of doing a good system, a successful system, without taking the stakeholder into consideration. Requirements analysis, it is an old saying that we should take care of a requirements analysis, but I agree with all of you that nowadays it's even more important. And last but not least, establish networks among parliaments and if possible with private companies as well to exchange the knowledge and thus enhance the overall outcomes. Well, we have reached the end of this debate. I thank you all.